Usually when we think about language, we picture it like a map.
Right. Yeah. Like a human invention.
Exactly. We point at a tall wooden thing with leaves. We all agree to call it a tree. And, we move on. We assume the word itself is completely arbitrary.
Yeah. Standard linguistics says it has no physical or structural connection to the object it describes. It's just a label.
Right. A convenient label we just slapped on the thing so we can talk about it. But what if that map isn't just a metaphor?
That is the big question.
I mean, what if the words you speak are actually a literal physical blueprint? Imagine if the specific sounds you make aren't arbitrary at all, but are a direct mapping of the Earth's geology built right into the cartilage and muscle of your throat.
It completely changes everything because suddenly the map becomes the living territory. Your anatomy isn't just making random noise.
Yeah.
It's actually mirroring the thermodynamic realities of the planet.
And that is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome back to another deep dive to you, the learner. We are so glad you're here. Today, our mission is to explore this mind-bending, hidden architecture of human language.
It's a heavy topic, but so fascinating.
It really is. Specifically, we're going to analyze how a seemingly simple phonetic shift, moving from the hard velar G sound to the floral KH sound, actually reveals an ancient, literal connection to the physical earth.
Yeah, and our source for this is an incredible transcript called the Promethean Codex.
Oh, this source is wild.
It's intense, right? It's this deep-cut historical and linguistic dialogue between a questioner named Karakin and an AI interlocutor. And together, they trace the origin of a really common word, the word gas, all the way back to like 25,000 BC.
Which is just staggering to think about.
Oh, yeah. They route the history of this single word through ancient Armenian volcanic laboratories, the complex star charts of the Magi, and ultimately down to the mathematical architecture of the human mouth.
And I can promise you this. By the end of this deep dive, you will never look at your own mouth or say the word gas the exact same way again.
Definitely not.
So let's start right there, actually, with the mundane. The word gas. I mean, we use it constantly, right?
Oh, all the time.
We put it in our cars, we heat our stoves with it. Where does textbook history actually say that word comes from?
Well, if you look it up, the story is pretty straightforward. So in 1648, there was this Flemish chemist named Jan Baptist van Helmont.
Okay.
He was working in his laboratory, experimenting with burning charcoal, and he was just observing the vapors it produced.
Right, doing standard 17th century chemistry stuff.
Exactly. And he realized he was dealing with a completely new state of matter.
Yeah.
It wasn't a solid, it wasn't a liquid. So he needed a new word for it.
Makes sense.
The standard textbook narrative is that he based the word gas on the Greek word chaos, referring to the formless void, the unshaped elements of the universe.
Okay, hold on. I see how a Flemish chemist might read classical Greek texts, sure. But translating a rough, throat-clearing sound into the high-minded concept of chaos, that feels like a huge leap.
It does sound like a stretch when you put it that way.
Right. Are we sure this isn't just some weird coincidence of 17th century spelling?
Well, that is the crucial question.
Mm.
And it's exactly where the Codex dives into the physical mechanics of sound. The sources argue Van Helmont didn't just invent a word out of thin air or, make a casual spelling choice.
So what happened?
His vocal tract was physically forced to retrieve an ancient phonetic code.
Wait, forced? How?
Well, think about his native language.
Yeah.
In Van Helmont's native Flemish dialect, the letter G is not pronounced like the hard-blocked English G in the word goat.
Oh, right, it's different.
Yeah, it's a voiceless velar fricative. It's a rough, aspirated, turbulent sound.
Kind of like pushing air really hard against the back of your throat, like a KH sound.
Yes, exactly. Very similar to the Jurst sound in the Scottish word loch. And that specific rough Flemish G perfectly matched how the ancient Greek letter chi, the X at the start of chaos, was actually pronounced in antiquity.
Oh, wow.
Right. So to Van Helmont's ear, and honestly, more importantly, to his throat, spelling it G-A-S was the closest phonetic mechanical equivalent to capturing the literal sound of invisible turbulent expansion.
But the Codex details something called the phonetic ladder, right? Which suggests this wasn't just some random Flemish dialect quote.
No, not at all. It's actually a biological inevitability of how the human vocal tract moves from containment to release.
Okay, let's unpack this. Think of your throat like a physical pressure valve.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Yeah.
Because to understand the ladder, you have to look at what your anatomy is actually doing. The bottom of that ladder is the hard-voiced velar stop.
Which is our standard English G.
Oh, right. When you make that sound, you are physically blocking the airway at your soft palate. The pressure just builds up behind that seal. And the dialogue aligns this G with physical containment. It represents the heavy, solid, unmoving earth.
Like trapped energy.
Exactly.
But when you need to describe something volatile, something breaking out of its container like an invisible vapor, your throat has to move up the ladder. You literally have to break that seal.
You do. You push past the soft palate and create what the sources call the floral KH. This is that turbulent friction of air rushing against the back of your throat. Mechanically, it represents the rough earth cracking open to release raw breath.
And that release is mapped by what the codex calls the KHAZ formula, isn't it?
Yes, the KHAZ formula. So the root KHA represents the widest possible opening of the throat. It's the pure release of raw breath, or in ancient terms, spirit.
But breath alone just sort of dissipates into nothing, right?
Exactly, just vanishes. You need to channel it. So you add the Z. That ZZZZ sound creates localized vibrating friction right at your teeth.
It acts as a boundary.
Yeah. Takes that invisible escaping breath and captures it into buzzing kinetic energy hitting the material world.
Okay, I want you, the listener, to physically feel this mechanical difference in your throat right now. Seriously, try this wherever you are. First, just make a hard G sound. Goo.
Yeah, pay attention to the back of your throat when you do it.
Feel how it completely blocks the airway. That is the heavy contained earth. Now, force air through that blockage to create that rough KH friction.
You can really feel the release.
Right, that is the pressure valve opening. Finally, add a buzzing Z right behind your teeth. Haz. You can literally feel how your anatomy takes invisible breath from your lungs and turns it into vibrating kinetic energy right in your mouth.
And that physical sensation is exactly the point. What's brilliant is that this ancient vocal technique survives perfectly intact in common speech today.
Oh, totally, like the mid-20th century jazz slang.
Yes, when they'd say, what a gas. Or even the Greek colloquialism xazi, which describes a really loud, laughing, highly animated exchange between people.
So when jazz musicians were saying, what a gas, to describe like an amazing party or a great song, they weren't just making up random slang.
No, they were unconsciously reverting to the exact structural root of the word. They were describing a literal eruption of high-spirited social chaos and kinetic energy.
They were feeling the KHAZ formula in a crowded room.
I love that. And this is where the transcript scales things up dramatically, right?
Yeah.
Because if human anatomy was mimicking the Earth's thermodynamic pressure on a micro level, how did ancient people scale that understanding?
Well, they didn't just look at their own throats. They looked at the actual landscape.
The landscape of the Armenian highlands, specifically.
They looked at a massive stratovolcano called Mount Aragats. According to the dialogue, this region wasn't just a pretty backdrop. It was an open-air geological laboratory.
Because it was a highly active volcanic zone?
Exactly. It was where the Earth physically breathed raw, sulfurous thermal vapors. The Earth was literally exhaling GAZ. Which brings us to the local mythology, specifically this ancient Armenian figure named Vahan, who is known as the Dragon Reaper.
Yeah, and often modern history just writes these figures off as fairy tales, primitive superstitions.
Sure, just stories.
But the Codex argues that this isn't mythology at all. It's a literal thermodynamic event described through phonetic engineering.
Okay, wait. Linking a mythological Dragon Reaper to thermodynamic vents. That sounds a little like we're forcing modern geology onto an ancient fairy tale.
It does sound like a modern projection at first.
Right, so what actual evidence connects the word Vahan to a literal volcano erupting?
The evidence is in the syllables themselves, especially when you apply that phonetic ladder we just talked about.
Yeah.
Let's decode the name Vahan.
Okay, let's do it.
VAH structurally represents the sudden forced expulsion of kinetic force. It's a blowout, a violent release of pressure.
And AGM.
AGN is the ancient root for raw primordial fire. So VAH-AGN isn't like a guy with a sword. It is the violent roaring eruption of the Earth's inner core, literally blowing its top.
Wow. And the geography of the mountain actually maps to this mechanism perfectly.
It does. The mountain itself, Aragats, contains the root gats. And structurally, that translates to a gate or a colander.
A colander, like for straining pasta.
Exactly like that. Think about what a stratovolcano actually is mechanically. It's a giant geological colander straining boiling liquid rock and releasing volatile gases through specific vents.
That is a crazy image.
And hanging above this volcanic colander is what the ancients called the OTN. That's the atmospheric canopy of water, the high-altitude moisture.
So the myth of Vahan is actually an observation of a first cause event. It's the literal volatile earth fire, the Vahagn, shooting up through the mountain colander, the Ghats, and slamming directly into the atmospheric water, the OTN.
Yes. Primal fire meets atmospheric water to create the vaporous world.
Okay, but wait, what about the dragons? Because Vahan was famous for reaping or conquering dragons.
Right, the dragons. The Codex identifies them as Vishaps. And if you go to the Armenian highlands today, Vishaps are giant actual basalt megaliths.
Giant stone monoliths.
Yeah. Ancient observers placed these massive stones around the high lakes and volcanic slopes. And they didn't place them there as artistic tributes to fantasy monsters.
Why were they there then?
They placed them there to mark, measure, and potentially stabilize these volatile thermal energy lines. The dragon was the volatile geological pressure moving under the earth.
Oh, wow. And the megalith was the cap.
The cap or the marker, exactly.
If they were setting up megaliths to track thermal pressure, I mean, they were doing serious science. But how did they connect that earthly volatility to the broader cosmos? Because did they just look at volcanoes or did they look higher?
Oh, they definitely looked higher. And that shifts our focus straight up to the sky and to the concept of the meg.
The meg?
Yeah. In Orthodox linguistics, the root mag or meg just means great or large. It's where we get words like magnitude or magnificent.
Sure, basic Latin roots.
But the dialogue reveals meg is something much more specific. It's the great metric. It represents the vertical mountain axis, the monad, the ultimate structural blueprint connecting the earth to the sky.
And connected to that is the MN cluster, right?
Yes. Think of words like monad, moon, axis mundi, mind, monument. In this phonetic architecture, M represents the material matrix, the physical world, and N represents the structural line or the coordinate.
So together, the MN cluster represents measurement and cosmic memory.
Exactly. It's the math used to track the universe.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think of the Magi not as wizards, but as ancient mountain-based quantum computers.
I love that analogy.
Right. Because we usually picture the Magi as guys in robes or mysterious fortune tellers from the East. But under this framework, the Magi were the masters of the great metric.
Yeah, they were empirical scientists of the invisible forces. The Codex points out that starting from what it identifies as Noah's first mountain observatory at Metzamor,
Also known as Karahund, right?
yes, around 5500 BC,
Yeah.
the Magi rigorously tracked the monad and the stars. They were calculating the thermodynamic energy of the Earth against the geometric triangles formed by slow-moving planets.
Which completely changes the story of the Star of Bethlehem.
Oh, it completely rewrites it. When you actually look at the astronomical data from that era, the star tracked by the Magi wasn't just some random, unpredictable comet.
What was it?
It was a highly anticipated, mathematically calculated triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the constellation of Pisces.
And what does that specific conjunction mean mechanically to a master of the metric?
Well, Jupiter was considered the king planet, right? The sovereign force.
Right.
Saturn was the cosmic ruler, the ultimate timekeeper of the outer solar system.
And Pisces.
Pisces represented the dawn of a new age. So to the Magi, this incredibly rare 800-year geometric alignment was a mathematical coordinate.
Coordinate for what?
It was a sign that the cosmic monad had physically localized on Earth. The vertical axis was aligning.
Oh, man. So their famous gifts, the gold, frankincense, and myrrh, they weren't just expensive tribute for a baby.
No, they were a transfer of data.
They represented this exact metric because gold is the heaviest, most incorruptible metal. So it represented the monad, the unalterable sovereign center. Frankincense is a resin that burns into an ascending smoke. So it represented the volatile GAS, the KHAZ, the spirit transforming from heavy matter into ascending breath.
And myrrh, which was famously used in embalming, represented the mortal matrix, the physical containment of the body.
They were literally handing over the architectural codes of physical reality. The heavy center, the ascending spirit, and the material container.
It's incredible to think about it that way.
But this naturally brings up a massive question. If this vertical metric, this meg, was an innate bag of 10 that belonged to everyone's throat, I mean, if human anatomy naturally connects to this cosmic and geological reality, why is this a secret?
Yeah, why don't we know it?
Exactly. Why don't we know about it today? Who stole the axis?
Well, this is where the dialogue introduces the concept of the Flatlanders.
The Flatlanders.
Yeah, and the late-era institutional priesthoods. According to the transcript, as human societies became more heavily centralized, these institutional powers usurped the universal baseline.
Why would they do that?
Because they saw that the wild, vertical fire of the mountain and the individual power of the human throat was completely impossible to control.
So they extracted it.
They extracted the vertical fire and flattened it onto a horizontal sacrificial plate. The dialogue uses the example of the Vedic fire deity Agni, or even the mathematical invention of zero.
Wow.
Institutions built flat temples to mimic the mountain. They forced the population to look down at a controlled, institutionalized fire pit, rather than looking up at the living, vertical axis of the earth.
They made themselves the mandatory middlemen for the cosmos.
Exactly.
And the sources claim this structural theft happened in classical Greece, too, right? They argue that classical scribes structurally castrated the language itself, what they call the lezu.
Yeah, and they did this by manipulating the alphabet. They removed the primary containment vessel, the letter V, but honestly, more insidiously, they took the continuous, ecstatic, cosmic cycle of nature, which was represented by the phonetic sound I-O.
Okay, wait, let's visualize this for the listener so it makes sense. Picture the letters I and O. The O is a continuous circle, right? An infinite cycle. The I is a finite vertical line. If you physically drag the vertical line of the I straight down through the center of the O, you get the Greek letter phi.
The golden ratio.
Exactly. The Codex is saying this wasn't just a spelling change. It was a mathematical cage. You pin down the infinite cycle of the O with the finite dividing line of the I.
That is exactly the visual mechanism. They turned a symbol of continuous cosmic flow into a static ratio that was used for building static temples.
Unbelievable.
And it goes further. They took that buzzing, high-frequency cosmic energy of consciousness, that ZZZ sound we practiced earlier.
The kinetic energy.
Right. And they trapped it. They personified it into a localized, domesticating anthropomorphic deity, Zeus.
So they took a universal law of thermodynamics and turned it into an elite political narrative about a guy on a cloud throwing lightning bolts.
Pretty much, yeah.
So what does this all mean? The dialogue goes so far as to call this structural theft of a people's phonetic architecture a true genocide. Now, calling a linguistic shift a genocide is an incredibly heavy, intense claim.
It is a very severe term to use.
But they argue that by forcing humanity to look down at an artificial altar rather than up at the living vertical axis, these institutions fundamentally muted the human species.
Yes.
So if we are muted, how does the architecture of our own anatomy fight back? How does PER-RN fight back?
Well, the ultimate rebellion remains right in your face, literally. The dialogue looks closely at the Armenian word for mouth, which is PER-RN. Let's break down the math of that word.
Let's do it.
Per-R represents the physical ring, the container formed by your lips and teeth. Geometrically and mathematically in this ancient framework, the physical ring holds a value of 10.
10.
Yeah, it's the complete perfected metric of the physical world.
Yeah.
In, or Anen, represents the cosmic coordinate of heaven.
Which holds the value of 9. So picture a cone. The circular base at the bottom is the 10, the physical reality. The apex at the very top, pointing to the sky, is the 9.
Precisely. So Per-R Anen, the mouth, is a living physiological equation. Every single time you open your mouth to speak a first-person truth, the 10 of your physical earthly reality brings forth the 9 of heaven.
Your mouth is structurally channeling the geometry of the cosmos every time you speak freely.
Yes.
But there is a severe warning built into this anatomy, too.
Yeah.
If you suppress this truth, if you bite your tongue and hold back that life-giving Khazi breath, it doesn't just quietly go away, it stagnates.
The dialogue states that suppressed Khazi reverses into ZNKH.
ZNKH. Even just saying it feels like a blockage. It feels hard.
Because it is the literal phonetic and chemical signature of rot, putrefaction, and decay.
Wow.
Let's look at the mechanism of why. Khazi is breath moving out, expanding into the world with kinetic friction. If you swallow it, you reverse the flow. The Z friction is forced backward into the static structure of the N, and it's completely choked off by the hard stopping sound of the KH.
And in chemistry, when you trap biological energy and deprive it of oxygen, it ferments and rots.
Exactly. Phonetically, when the kinetic energy of your voice is trapped inside the material cage of your body, it turns inward and festers.
Okay, let's quickly recap the sheer scale of this mind-expanding journey we've been on. We started by tracing the word gas from a 17th century Flemish laboratory, realizing that Van Helmont's throat was actually retrieving an ancient phonetic release of pressure.
Right, the KHAZ formula.
Then we scaled up from the friction in our own windpipes to the volcanic colander of Mount Arrogats, realizing that Dragon Reaper was actually a thermodynamic blueprint. We tracked that energy into the sky with the ancient Magi, decoding their astronomical gifts as the great metric.
The Meg.
And finally, we confronted how flatland priesthoods hijacked that cosmic grammar, flattening the IO into the cage of phi.
The most important takeaway from this entire deep dive into the Promethean Codex is that this isn't just ancient esoteric history.
No, it's right now.
This isn't just about what happened in 5500 BC. The 9 of heaven and the 10 of the earth are literally sitting inside your mouth right now.
Yes.
You possess the universal bag of 10. You possess the physical KPR or copper conductive energy to speak your own reality into existence, and you do not need an institution, a textbook, or a priesthood to translate it for you.
And that leaves us with a final lingering question to ponder as you go about your week. The dialogue warned us that suppressing the floral KH of your true voice turns your kinetic energy into the stagnant, festering rot of ZNKH.
Which nobody wants.
Right. So look around at your life. Look at the corporate jargon, the heavily sanitized language, the safe flatland scripts you are forced to use at work or online every single day.
Yeah, think about what you're saying.
What other modern words are secretly caging your energy? What phrases are silently waiting for you to shatter the plate and unleash your chaotic, volcanic breath?
It is time to stop reading the map and start feeling the territory.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring the hidden architecture of your world, and we will see you next time.